So farming started 12,000 years ago. That's the oldest record of farming, though other areas in the world started independently. And those oldest records started in the Mesopotamia region between the Tigris and Euphrates River. And that is modern Turkey, Iraq, and southwestern Iran. Farming practices back then relied on very basic techniques, and selections of plants and animals wasn't just based on yield. Those plants and those animals also had to fit a particular climate, soil type, and remain productive, be disease resistant, and more particularly also were fitting traditional cooking methods. What farming did to us revolutionized and changed the world forever. What we've got to acknowledge is when you start to farm intensively, you have excess food production. That excess food production allows civilization to hold an army. When you can hold an army, you can support innovation. Why is that? Because you have social order. The army secures the social order. You have social order within your realm and outside your realm. And that allows you to innovate and spend social resources into making progress. And once you get the wheel turning, there's no stopping it, because more innovation are going to sustain more food production are going to sustain bigger civilization, and so on. And farming has just done that for us. Now, the world population back then was believed to be around 5 million people. 5 million people is about the population of Greater Sydney spread across the world. There's now 8 billion people in the world. The world population, and thanks to farming, is predicted to reach 9.1 billion by 2050. The question is, can our agricultural system sustain that population growth? And that's a question I think we should be asking now to review our practices and what we're doing to make sure we're prepared for all those other people to come up. Unfortunately, farming, intensive farming as it is limited. On that map, all the green areas are showing you places in the world where we can do intensive farming. Other areas in the world can sustain some farming practices, but not the sort of farming practices that are going to feed 9.1 billion people. To give you an example, the UK today is completely reliant on import to feed the animal it needs to feed the people in the country. So the UK cannot produce enough crop to feed those animals. It has to come from import. And that sort of scenario is going to increase. Now you may think that perhaps we could look at other solutions to develop other land, to make them more productive. Less than 1% of the water in the world is suitable to human consumption. That water is also going to be in direct competition from household consumption. So I think we can irrigate. I think irrigation is going to be part of the solution coming to the future. It's not going to be the whole solution. Farming is also changing. Farming was traditionally owned by farming families. This map, the darker the red, the more farming there are in that country. That's for 2030. If we look at Australia, we're very light color. The farms are getting bigger and bigger and less owned by families. So now, modern farming practices, as much as we would like to go and be against them, I just would like to give you figures from 1820. Let's go back. In 1820, 85% of the world population lived in poverty. And when I mean poverty, I don't mean poverty where they skip dessert. I mean 85% of the people on a daily basis were struggling to meet their calorie intake, their need for basic survival. Modern farming practices brought that number down in 1950 to 45%. In 1950, only 45% of people lived in poverty. 2018, we're now down to 7% of the world population living in poverty. And that's a great achievement. That's an achievement that every single farmer in this room has contributed to and will continue to contribute to. 7% is not great, but it's better than 85. So why, after so many successes, are we questioning the use of synthetic fertilizer? Why are we pointing fingers today? And that's very simple. Back in 1961, we were using about 2.5 kilos of nitrogenous fertilizer for about 1%, for a ton per hectare for all cereal crops. In 2020, we're now using 43 kilos of synthetic fertilizer for a 1.65 ton per hectare. If I put that in percentage, we've increased our yield by 52% in Australia, and I think big clap for that. But we've increased the consumption of fertilizer by 1,690%. I'm going to give that number again. We've increased fertilizer consumption by 1,690%. This is criminal. So I'm not saying that we should ditch synthetic fertilizer. I think we should really start to question our consumption for the results we're getting, for what it does to our soil health. On top of that, for whatever we apply, we now know that plants are only uptaking between 40 and 60% of what's supplied. Right now, when you apply, for every dollar you put in, you're losing between 40 and 60 cents. That's a lot. That's too much, and that's causing soil health issues. So what are we looking at? We're looking at farming tomorrow, and the farmer of tomorrow is looking at looking at his soil. The focus is on your soil. The yield you're going to get is only going to be as big as what your soil can support. And really what we're looking at is looking at the chemical properties of your soil. Is your soil pH okay? Can my soil hold on to nutrient? Can my soil exchange those nutrients? We're looking at physical properties. Is your soil friable enough? Can the roots of the plants go down? Can the roots of the plants capture soil moisture as further down as they can go? And all of those properties mostly rely on your soil biology. It's the soil microbes that are going to contribute to the exchange properties of your soil, to managing the pH of your soil and the structure of that soil. And now, instead of just applying, we're looking at what's going on underneath, and suddenly your soil becomes valuable. So why the big buzz about soil organic carbon? Organic carbon is the most common element in the universe. Most of the molecules and building blocks of lives are made out of carbon. Sugar, in all their forms, which is critical to life on Earth, that's just a long chain of carbon. And so why are we telling you to put it back into your soil? We're doing that because the microorganisms in your soils need it. The human body is made out of 65% oxygen and 80% carbon. So yeah, what do we care about carbon? Well, not much. But the fungi and the bacteria in your soil are made of over 50% carbon. That's their building block. That's what they're made out of. If you don't put that carbon back into your soil, you're taking away what they need to be. And you're losing all those properties and all those microorganisms that are going to make your soil a living place and a place that's productive. If I look at 1 gram of soil, there are more microorganisms in 1 gram of soil than there are people on the planet. 1 cubic centimeter of soil contains approximately 1,800 species of microorganisms. Each of those has got a very specific function to play. Some bacteria, some families of bacteria are very good at phosphorus uptake. They're going to manage to stretch your phosphorus uptake for that plant. When your plant can no longer uptake it, those bacteria will take on that role. We now know that fungi, we now call them the highway of plant roots or the extension of plant roots. Fungi will go further into the soil looking for moisture in nutrient before the roots of your plants will get there. If you're not looking after those, you're back on the treadmill, you're going to keep on applying for very little results and very high costs. And so why are we now talking about the value of soil organic carbon? If you can put that carbon back into your soil, you will increase productivity. You will increase water holding capacity. A 1% increase in soil organic carbon is equal to a 30% in productivity. A 1% in soil organic carbon is an extra 1,000, numbers in English have always been my nightmare. 150,000 liters per hectare of water holding capacity. That's an increase. If you increase by 2%, it's 300,000 liters. And now you can start seeing the value. And on top of that, Australia is now the only place in the world where you can attract credits from the government when you increase that soil carbon. Soil carbon credits, every one of you in this room has heard about Australian carbon credit unis or ACCUs. ACCUs have got a very real value. They're now valued at about $150 in Europe. They are now reaching $40 an ACCUs in Australia. They are a financial commodity. They've got a real price. With every financial commodities, there are great opportunities, but there are also a lot of pitfalls. One of that pitfall, and the first thing you should be asking yourselves when thinking about doing a carbon credit is, who owns the credits? And the answer is very simple. It should be you. It should be the farmer. The farmer should own those credits. They should own the project. And when you're thinking about having a soil carbon project, one of the first thing we advise people is to talk to the accountant. You must have a chat about how you're going to use those ACCUs. Is it going to be under the family business? Are they going to be for your retirement plan? Are they going to be under a trust? And once you've decided that with your accountant, it's important that you're working with people that are going to empower you to understand all the different steps. There are many steps. It is a complicated registration process, but it's doable. The first step is to do a soil baseline test where we collect a whole bunch of samples, we determine what your levels are, and that from there, 5 years down the track, we then come back, we do more soil testing, and that's when your credits are issued. But before you go into doing that, because it's quite an investment, you must do a farm assessment. What it means is that we come to your farm, we have a discussion with you, we understand your farming system, we understand your soil, we understand your managing practices, and that will then determine your potential for generating ACCUs. So if you want to know more information, please come and talk to us. I'm really excited. I'm excited that we're generating the conversation about talking about soil health. I'm really excited that we're now looking at the way we consume chemicals when we apply chemicals. I think Australian farmers are going to be up for the challenge. They're going to rise again to supply the world with the food we so dearly need, and we'll be there to do that. And I'm really excited about the fact that you can now look after your soil and generate additional farm incomes through the ACCU system. So thank you for today, and please applaud all the people that have made today possible. It was a terrific day. Thank you.
What sort of scale are we talking about that this becomes sort of viable? You know, like you've got to have lots of hectares, or?
Thanks, that's a really good question, John. It all depends on your rainfall, yes, your farm size, but also your rainfall, your soil type, and how low your levels are, how much we think you can then build on, and that will help you determine whether or not it's going to be a good return on investment when you get onto the project. But really, in this environment with the rainfall, you're looking at probably a minimum of 300 hectares, 250, and then, yeah, it becomes a profitable project to take on, yeah.
Thank you, Aurelie. Can you baseline in a good season, and then run in a rip-roaring drought, and 3 years later you measure again, or when you go around for your next assessment, how does our variability work in our very differing climates regionally? Thanks.
That's a really good question, because you're going into a 25-year project and it's very scary. When you start to baseline, yes, of course, it'd be great to baseline when it's the peak of the drought and your soil is terrible. But even if you baseline in good years and you implement the changes there's about 10 management practices that the government recommends. If you implement between 6 and 7 of those, you're in really good shape to increase that soil carbon. Now, when the time comes after you've done your baseline, and the time comes to do another lot of assessment and soil measurement, if let's say there's a terrible drought or bushfires in your area, there's a leeway of about 2 years where you can just decide to go, no, we really want to delay. It's been very terrible environmental conditions. They're not going to be representative of the hard work we've put in. And then you get another 2 years. Equally, if you've done your baseline and you've seen terrific results on your farm and you think before the 5 year, and it's about 3.5, 4 year mark, and you go, we're very happy with what's happened. I think we should do the 5 year mark soil testing. You can do that also. So there is a bit of leeway. The regulator is not there to get you and chop your head at the next opportunity.